MiRacle Pool on the Quest is a fantastic mixed reality pool game that gives you a full-size pool table or small snooker table in your living room that you can walk around free from the dangers of bumping into anything because you're in mixed reality, and have some awesome online games. It's got a good multiplayer community, and while this isn't a review of that game, I do highly recommend it, but I need to talk about it because this accessory, the MasterBreaker Q from DeadEyeVR, is really tailor-made for that game. So thank you to DeadEyeVR, they sent me this to review, so that's what I'm checking out today. I'll show you the makeup of the Q and then show you it in use. And of course the whole point of this accessory is to add immersion, to add realism. And it does do that, but not without some drawbacks, which I'll go through. So first of all, it is a real Q, it's a real pool Q. I'll show you the butt there, and we'll talk about the makeup of the Q. It is a two-piece Q, and you screw together with this central piece that holds your backhand controller. So for me, I'm left-handed, I play with my left hand up front, so my right controller goes in here. It just sits between where you screw the Q together, plop your controller in and tighten it up. Job done. Holds it really nice and secure. Now the first thing I'll mention is, if you want to use it like you would in real life, if you're like me, you would have your chin on the Q. Can't do that, obviously, because of the controller here. So that's the first thing I want to mention. So you just got to be up a little bit. A lot of people I know do that anyway. In fact, I see a lot of people are quite high playing, so that's not really an issue. You can have it this way around, turn the controller around so it's facing up. Gives you more room, but again, you can still hit your chin on this little bit, but it gives you more room. I would say slightly less accurate tracking. Maybe not so much because of the occlusion of the Q, although I suppose that doesn't help, but it feels it's behind you a little bit more than if it's up here instead of down here. But yeah, it's a good system, holds it really snug, and you can still get your hand on it to use the thumbstick and buttons and so on. Your left controller, in fact, you just hold it with your front hand and make a bridge like normal. And in fact, you can buy this Q with their knuckle grips, you know, that goes over the back. The right hand one isn't going to help you in this situation, or your backhand one, but the other one would. I don't use it just because I never really use them on the Quest, and they don't work with the charging dock anyway. So that's by the by, really just talking about the Q itself. So let's move on to the haptic system. Now they designed this system up the front with a sliding weight to simulate the feel of hitting a ball. And it does that to some extent, especially of course when you've got the headset on, when you're seeing that and you are doing it. It does translate well to hitting the ball, but there is a slight second hit. It's probably too fast maybe to hear, but of course you can see it hits here to simulate the force, and then it goes back again. And while there is a rubber O-ring on there, which does deaden it to some degree, it doesn't completely. So you can feel it when it goes back again. It's better if you take the shot and follow through and stay in the shot like you should do in real life anyway. Some people are kind of, you know, jumpy, pull it back. Fine, but that can, you know, obviously make it go back and forward. So you should take your shot and stay in the shot as if you would in real life if you're playing properly. So yeah, that's how that system works. It does all add weight because it is a real Q to start with, and let's be honest, it's, you know, it's cheap. I shoot Chinese Q. It's quite heavy. Plus you've got the weight of the controller, the haptic system. So it's a heavy bit of kit. So you don't want to be playing in the air. You do want your hand down on something, making a bridge, which is the whole point, to add to realism, to try and be as immersive as possible. So it does have some of the drawbacks though of a gun stock. It will slow you down, especially to start with. You've got to get used to it, of course you do, because you take your shot and you take some time to learn to get lined up, but also after every shot, if you've got to move the table, you've got to move your hand down, move around with the thumbstick, get your hand back in the right position. So it's just a bit of a learning curve. Okay, so in game in MiRacle Pool, now first off you'll see, of course, your in-game Q doesn't line up with your real Q because it wants to join the two controllers, not the end of the Q with the back controller. So that's something to just keep in your mind, and you'll get used to it. It's a bit weird at first. The first hurdle is you've got to get the in-game table, the bed of the table, about the right height as whatever you're resting on, whether that's a table, back of a chair, whatever. So when you put your bridge hand down, of course it's the right height for the ball. And you can see, yeah, it's about right for me. Can put whatever spin on it, that's fine. You do want to go into options, in settings, make sure snap to table is off. When you're using the cue, you certainly want that off, otherwise you're going to hinder yourself. Okay, so let's get down. I've got less room here than I usually would have. Obviously I'm playing between this chair and this wall, but it should be okay to get the idea. Now obviously I want to make sure that this controller stays on top. The weight of it obviously makes it want to spin round like that, but I need to keep it on top for good for tracking, of course. And you'll see the first problem with this cue is the brake, and that's a combination of the game and the cue, because this game is hard to make a powerful brake anyway. It can be done, you can do like 100% power, so to speak, but certainly not with this cue, really, because of the weight. And DeadEyeVR know that. Now of course I need to move now, so I've got to slide my hand up to spin the table around. Now that's where you sort of need in-game implementation, and you could tell it you're using an accessory and it gives you 100% power on the brake, and that wouldn't be cheating, because without this you can 100% power it. So you're not at an advantage. It would just even it out, because you just can't do it at the moment with this accessory, because brakes are not the best simulated in this game anyway. So I'll have a go at before that. So you can see I've got to move the table around a lot because I don't have a lot of room. The more room you've got, obviously the less faff, because you can move yourself in real life. But it's like this feels more realistic, like lining up. And yeah, certainly taking the shot feels a lot more realistic. Does the haptic? The haptic has more of an effect when you're doing the break or a harder shot, but doing a little shot like that, not so much. Not so much. In fact, let me highlight another problem here, because it brings the haptic thing into it. For the haptic thing to work, obviously the cue needs to be a bit of a down angle, because if it's like this, it's on the verge of sliding back and forward. Now, this is where, again, the game needs to implement calibration like gun stocks do, because the cue, if I hold the cue roughly level, to me that's roughly level. The in-game cue, though, has a really raised butt, because it's following between this controller and this one, which is quite high. And likewise, if I had it the other way around down here, obviously the controller would be the other way. The in-game cue would be going down. So, which means when I've got the cue in the game, the butt is raised somewhat. So if I lower it to be more realistic, how I feel it should be in game, it's obviously making that haptic then slide back and forward, if that makes sense. So that's another advantage, one advantage of having the controller underneath, spin it round, and then at least you're going to keep the haptic really where it needs to be, falling down to the front for the shot, as opposed to being there where it can slide back and forward, if that makes sense. But you can play around, it's easy to adjust where you have this controller. Anyway, so yeah, so the faff is, of course, I've got to move to this controller to spin around again. It'd be nice if the devs of the game could implement a way of spinning around just by using one controller. Like, it would be good if it moved around like that, but if you held grip and did it, it then spun you, because, you know, the grip isn't used there at the moment. You know, that would be a good implementation. Then you'd never have to reach and grab for this controller, which would save a lot of faff. You keep your hand in the right place, and that's it. Save a lot of time and a lot of calamity. So it does feel good aiming like this. Ooh, it does feel good. You know, I've got to say, you've got to get past the faff factor. The faff factor, which, you know, VR accessories have. There's a learning curve. It is easier, it's faster just to use the controllers. It is. Same with like a VR gun stock. You're quicker without it. But I think this can add accuracy. My first thought was really was only for immersion, but it can. Look how I can hold it. When you hold the trigger, it locks it. So of course it's steady then. But without the trigger, I'm solid. So you can be a bit more finesse here, like with my movement, than when you're just holding your hands in the air. And I'm going to scratch, but that's fine. Ah. Okay, short in-game demo over. I hope that served the purpose and showed it certainly adds to immersion. Now, I've just got to make a disclaimer and say that was kind of worst case scenario where I'm trying to play in this tight little space, not hitting the wall or the chair with my cue. The reason being, I can't play in the other room where I usually do because the new LED lights and stuff have got flicker on camera, so I had to do it in here really. Which meant, of course, I've got to move around in-game a lot more, which means always sliding up to the controller and using the thumbstick. That adds to faff, slows things down, but I still got it done. And that really was worst case scenario. So the more room you've got, the less you've got to, you know, move yourself around in game, the easier and quicker it is. With that said, I hope it did show. It certainly adds to immersion when you're on the shot, and it does feel good. I'm not wholly convinced by the haptic end here. It's kind of like this is maybe still within the development of ideas stage of the design, but I don't know exactly how it can be improved, but I'm sure they'll come up with a 2.0 one day. It perhaps needs some sort of way, maybe a light spring that's always under tension, so it's not easy to slide back and forward when the cue's level, so it's just kept, you know, it needs to be kept there. So maybe maybe there's a light spring there, but then when you hit, it's still going to compress the spring. I don't know. I'm sure they've tried all these things, but yeah, I don't know. It does add to the immersion, but I can feel the double hit, and it adds a lot of weight. So I don't know, swings and roundabouts. I've played without it, and I do prefer keeping it on. So there is that. So I think it's better with it than without it. Yeah, calibration. If the MiRacle Pool devs could add calibration like you do with a gun stock, that'd be fantastic to stop the cue going up or down compared to your real life cue. Now, unless you had a completely different design where the controller was mounted in line, you'd have to have a contraption where the cue screwed in either end. That would be phenomenal. Without that, yeah, you certainly need an in-game calibration. Hopefully that will come. But even without that, you get used to it, and the more you play, the more you just adjust anyway. So yeah, that's it really. We've got to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the price. The price itself isn't so bad. It's like, I'm going to talk about in English money, Great British pounds, so you do your own conversion, but it's, I think, £49 for the cue, as normal retail price. Adds on a bit if you want to add the knuckle grips, but just £49 for the cue. The problem is in the UK, shipping is like £44, nearly doubles it. So the best part of 100 quid, getting up there for this cue delivered in the UK. But that's the problem we got, because they haven't got I guess distributor over here at all. It'd be great if it was on Amazon or something, but it isn't. So obviously if you're in America, you haven't got that problem with the shipping costs. I think they do maybe some sort of free shipping over there if you spend a certain amount. Not sure. Check it out for yourself. But that's the problem here in the UK. £49 plus another, I think, £44 cheapest delivery. So it's very expensive. Now if you play a lot of MiRacle Pool, and I do and have, then okay, perhaps you can justify it, because it does feel good, especially once you get used to it and get into it. It's not perfect, as I said, there is faff to get used to. It does slow down your game a bit, but very enjoyable to use, very immersive, and yeah, thank you to DeadEyeVR for sending this to me so I can give it a go, and yeah, I will continue to use it for my own personal enjoyment. I think that pretty much covers everything, so that'll do it for now. Any comments or questions, drop below and I'll always try to answer. Otherwise, I'll catch you later. Cheers.